Hello, all right, today's painting is an exercise in brush control, playing with color. We're going to be doing a lot of repeating of shapes and technique to just really explore the subtle differences. I'm using a flat, wide brush because I'm going to choose to do squares over and over again. You could most definitely choose to do a different shape if you have a different brush, or really just make lines even. But what I'm trying to do with this exercise today is to play with the change in value of my color. So here, when I first made the layer of blue, it stayed light. And then I wanted to see what would happen when I added more paint onto the wet surface to see how it got darker, how the paint moves around. So it's a lot about experimentation and exploring. The other main thing I'm doing is paying attention to my brush control and how I'm creating each square. So I'm really trying to get good at looking and seeing the size and matching the size so that I can repeat that same size over and over again evenly across my paper. Now I know I won't be perfect at this. That's why we're doing exercises like this to get better, because it just takes practice to build up that visual awareness for where the middle of the paper is. How can I divide the paper into four? How can I fit this many shapes across the paper? And when we do that, it just really helps us figure out how things are arranged and then arrange them more precisely on our paper down the road. Now with this square, I didn't only pull from my blue paint, I actually grabbed a little bit of the green that was on my paint palette too, because that's another way I can explore my color to see how it acts differently. The paint I'm using today is just leftover paint from my paint tray. This is like my favorite paint to use because it's already been mixed and altered, so it's not the paint that's straight out of the tube. And almost always, I don't want the paint that's straight out of the tube. I have found that I really enjoy mixing my colors, adding bits of browns, bits of opposites, similar colors, and just getting things that are slightly different from usual. And that keeps my art interesting. Here I'm actually showing you a technique where when you use the opposite color, orange is opposite of blue, you can tone down the color of your painting. So look how that blue becomes much more muted than it was originally, because the opposite color, if you mix two opposites, they become brown. So if you mix opposites but you change the ratio, so I have mostly blue with a little bit of orange, then it just tones down that blue and mutes it more. So that's a really good thing to know, especially when painting realistically, because most colors in real life are not very vibrant. You want them to be more muted or toned down. Now, as I continue to paint, again, I am trying to repeat these shapes. I'm playing with the amount of water on my brush, so try and see what happens if you paint with a mostly dry brush or with a lot of water. See how it puddles and pools, and then watch how it dries on the edges. This is a great way to just explore watercolor and see how it acts so that you can use it in other ways. It's also super relaxing doing the same thing over and over again, but still having room to change little things. I love this type of repetitive painting because I get to paint, but I don't have to think a lot. And since I'm working a full-time job besides painting, this helps me still do the creative thing I love without exhausting my already exhausted brain. It's just a way to sit down, zone out, and be creative. So whether you squeeze this in your 5 minutes at the end of the day, or maybe this is something you do while you drink your morning coffee, this kind of exercise is a great way to squeeze in some time painting because you're using leftover paint, you're doing something super repetitive, and it doesn't really matter if you stop and start because each square is its own little artwork. So if you get interrupted halfway through, just set down your brush, go do what you have to do, and you can always come back. With a lot of watercolor art, I get kind of stressed out or nervous to start because I know that once I start, I don't want to stop because how wet or dry your surface is so important with watercolor. So even though it's an easy medium, so to speak, because it's easy cleanup, easy to get ready, it's also very finicky once you start working with it. All right, since this is so repetitive, I'm not going to make you watch me do every single little square. I'm doing the same thing over and over again. I'm playing with colors. I'm changing my water. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of fast forward through some of this square making, and we'll get on to doodling at the end. All right, you might have noticed that I am not perfect at keeping all my squares arranged nicely. They kind of started to veer to the left as I created them, so it's not perfect. At the very end, I'm going to show you a very easy way to fix that. You might be able to guess it, but either way, now it's time to do some doodling. I'm using my Micron felt tip pen. It is permanent. Usually, well, this is especially important if you draw before painting because you don't want the paint to wake up the pen. In this case, they're just my favorite pen, and maybe I'll want to add more watercolors, so I'll have this pen just in case. Next, I'm going to pull out my doodle inspiration. It's in here somewhere. I've taken time to draw out a bunch of different designs. Oh my goodness, I think it's right behind this. Yes, okay, there it is. So I took some time one day to just doodle and make different lines and designs. It really helps give me some ideas for when I do this doodling part. Otherwise, it can kind of stump me and I can sit and just feel like I don't know what to do and then I want to give up and walk away. So having some ideas to look at can really help jumpstart your creativity. I like to pick kind of 2 or 3 different types of designs to repeat to keep my artwork feeling cohesive and not too chaotic with a lot of variety. I also wanted to pick some curved designs since my colors are all made of squares. By balancing different curves versus straight, it can help create more interest in your artwork and not all feel exactly the same. So if I did a lot of hard edges or straight edges, it might be too similar to my squares, but that's something you'll just have to figure out as you play with and explore adding doodles and things to it. My pen I started with, this one is a 01, but I do think I'll switch to a bigger one too because I'm realizing that these thin lines are kind of hard to see and I'm making pretty small designs. So another balance is actually the weight of a line. That's the thickness of it and how easy it is to see. So playing with the thickness of your pen is also a good way to check in. I also realized partway through that this feels almost like a quilt, so I had a lot of fun creating little lines and dashes on the edges to make it look like they are sewn or patched together, which was super fun. I could have done that to all of them, but I tried to resist the urge. Here I'm going to switch to a little bit of a larger pen and you'll see the difference. My lines are just going to be a little bit bolder and a little easier to see. I think that just looks much cleaner lined. So I have got some teardrop designs, some spiral designs, and some line designs. And that's pretty much all I've stuck to for this doodling. It was actually a lot harder than I thought. I think because I had so many squares, I got a little intimidated for where and how often to doodle. So I don't know if there's a way to fix that, but that was my experience. So if that happens to you, you're not alone. Just keep pushing forward and just try things because you never know what will happen. And if you don't love it in the end, that's okay. It was just an activity for you to practice and grow. Okay, here I was really stuck and decided to just go with it, and I made a big long line design. And to be honest, I am not sure if I like how it turned out, but it was fun and it challenged me to not stay inside those little areas. So I did it, and there's no going back because it's in pen, and it was fun. So I think I'll call this a finished piece. Make sure to always sign it, even with those practices. It's a good practice to sign it to make sure that you kind of declare that you are finished and that you accomplished a piece. So I say that, but I almost forgot to sign it and put it here for you to look at and then realized, oh, wait a second, I've got to sign it. So there I go, gonna go back and sign it. Much better. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you give it a try with your leftover paint and have fun creating a fun design and doodling on top of it. Oh, I almost forgot. I was going to show you how to fix that warped edge. What I think I'm going to do first is pick my most obvious warped edge, so on the right here, and I'm going to try to make it parallel with my painting. So I'm kind of sliding it over so that they are parallel together. I'll trim this edge, and then I'll go back and I'll make sure that all the other edges are trimmed to match my new kind of, I don't know if it's called like tilt or angle, just make sure my other lines are perpendicular. But my paper cutter is not as sharp as I want it to be, so I'm gonna have to cut this. So I'm gonna fast forward so you don't have to watch me struggle, and that's an easy way to fix it if an exercise like this doesn't work out perfectly for you. Ta-da! There we go. Now it is much better organized and it looks nice and neat with those edges. So I hope you had fun. See you soon.